Hey everybody, it's Chris Harrison here with the Main Points Podcast. On this week's show, we have Deputy City Manager Jon Kindseth. Jon's been in Decatur since 2019, and I'm really excited to talk with him about how his family has transitioned here and what he's excited about for the future of Decatur. So thanks for tuning in. So Jon, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right. We really appreciate it. I don't know if we talked about this too much, but this is the Main Points Podcast. And really what we're trying to do is help people get a deeper understanding of Decatur. We've got kind of a tagline to educate, elevate, and celebrate. And we really want to elevate, celebrate, and educate people on what's happening in Decatur and really how people feel in Decatur. So we want to dive into that a little bit with you. And so with that, welcome, and tell us a little bit about where you're from and kind of how you got here.
Sure, absolutely. And I love those three points and the purpose of the podcast. And quite frankly, what better topic to talk about than to educate people what's happening in Decatur and how we're changing and moving forward as a community. And there is a lot to celebrate. And so certainly looking forward to getting more into those details.
Great.
As we talk today. But I've been in Decatur for about 4.5 years. I came right before COVID, the fall of 2019. I came to Decatur from Chicagoland. I had been up there for about 10 years. After I had graduated from ISU. So certainly no stranger to Central Illinois. My wife and I both went to ISU, so we're Redbirds. I enjoyed my time there in Bloomington Normal, and I got treated very well at ISU. And I still give back to that university and go back and educate the kids on the future of public service and things like that.
Yeah. Where was home? Where was hometown?
I was born in Minnesota. And my dad was in the Army, and he had some health issues, died at a young age. And so realistically, I kind of moved all over the country. And so that is what gives me a unique perspective, quite frankly. In both in city management and then also even in my role here in Decatur is, I was born in Minnesota. I grew up in Minnesota, Wisconsin. I ultimately ended up on the East Coast. Well, first I ended up in Louisiana, New Orleans as a young adult. And then I went from there to Baltimore, Virginia, North Carolina. I started college in North Carolina. I went 2 years there at a HBUC on a minority scholarship. And then from there, ultimately transferred to Illinois State, where I finished with the idea that I was going to go back to North Carolina for law school. That was my plan. And so I had gotten into UNC, but they said, hey, you'll have a better chance getting into the law school if you come from out of state because we have quotas and we prefer out of state students for law school. And so that was part of the rationale on leaving North Carolina. That in addition to my family, I had family here in Illinois, and my mom worked for State Farm in Normal. And she went to U of I. My dad's actually buried over at the U of I campus. And so I transferred up here. She wanted me to go to U of I, and I looked at U of I, University of Illinois, and I looked at ISU, and going into political science, I'm like, ISU is definitely the stronger school there. U of I is a more science, technology, engineering type of school, and Illinois State is more of the political school. And that's where, you got people like Adam Kinzinger and a number of the politicians that came out of there. And that's what I was interested in. And I thought I was going to go to law school. Many of my older siblings are all attorneys. And what I'll say is what changed my trajectory or whatever is I interned with the town of Normal while I was at college. And that's what got me interested in city management. I interned in the city manager's office doing kind of special projects. And one of the particular projects I worked on was the Citizens Academy. And so Chris Coos, who's still the mayor now, when he got into office, he wanted to do a Citizens Academy to educate the general public about what the city does. And so I was tasked with putting together that Citizens Academy when I was there. And essentially we went through each of the departments within the city, and basically they each had a night where they did a presentation to about 12 or 15 members of the general public that they would talk about their budget, what are the services they provide, the things that are changing within their department. And so that's what really inspired me. And I said, hey, that's what I want to do.
Interesting.
The broad breadth of what city management is really got got me excited. And from there, I decided that I would go to school for city management.
I've always said, and we've taken interns too, and I said by the end of this, you're either going to have an additional interest in real estate, or you'll say, I have no interest in real estate. But either way is a positive thing. So that's interesting. You went there as a, as an intern, with a trajectory to go to law school, and you ended up on your current, life and career and trajectory.
And that is why, so we've now working with DCLI, we've been hosting interns every year now for the last 3 years since the Jerry Dawson Civic Leadership Academy started. And that's why, for that same reason, I know that's what inspired me to choose a life of public service. And what I'll tell you is that we've had similar results even with the Decatur's internship. The intern that we had the first year is now an employee for the city. Nice. And so we basically encouraged and fostered him to ultimately continue to work for the city. He is still pursuing his education, which is important. I said, you can't, you got to still, got to go get a degree. You can't just come right out of high school and get stuck here, because you're not going to get the same opportunities. And so he is going to Richland, works at the city as well. And that's been a couple of years already since he's been done with his internship first year. So
very good. So you're here now. 4.5 years you've been in Decatur. Family here, and kind of tell us about, I guess, your family, what they're involved in, how they enjoy Decatur, how they feel about Decatur, and what are your impressions of Decatur from when you first got here to kind of where you're at now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will say, at the end of the day, when this opportunity first arose, the first thing I did, of course, was Google Decatur. I honestly had only been to Decatur one time, and that was when I was in college at ISU. I did home remodeling. That was basically how I paid for college, was doing construction. And so I did a lot of residential construction in Bloomington Normal, and then I started getting into some of their suburbs, and ultimately one of the projects brought me down here to Decatur. And coincidentally, it was the time when ADM was moving some of their offices up to Chicagoland. One of those employees was getting relocated. He wanted to sell his house in Decatur and knew he needed to fix certain things. And so I came down as a personal friend to kind of fix his house. That's the only time I'd been to Decatur. And so when this opportunity came, of course, I had to Google Decatur and learn a little bit about the community to make sure that it was the right fit. And what I'll say is that, the first things that popped up at that particular time were the two highlights were a shrinking community and it had a crime problem. And that was the online kind of reputation in 2019. And so, but of course, I know that a lot of it comes down to the eyes of the beholder. And so I still chose to kind of come down here, do the interview, look at the community myself, and really saw a lot of valuable assets that the community has. And so then I, as I got closer and I made it through the interview process and knew the job offer was coming, I told my wife, I said, I think you need to come down there now, and I want you to be bought into this too. This is a decision that we're making as a family, and not just me.
Not just a job.
Yeah, it's not just a job, and it's not just for me. And so at that time, we had 2 kids. I had a daughter and a son. And then I knew I had a third one on the way. And so that was
important times for a family there too.
Yeah, absolutely.
To relocate.
And of course I had a house under construction up in Chicagoland, because as I was having more kids, I had to build an addition on the house and some things like that. But it was, I think the family is what ultimately also contributed to why I chose to come to Decatur. At the end of the day, I knew that having 3 young kids, growing up in the suburbs was not necessarily the best environment for them. And what I mean by that is that they were just sheltered. We lived in the northwest suburbs, relatively affluent area, good schools, all those things. But there wasn't the exposure to the diversity of socioeconomic classes, things like that, that I felt that everybody should be exposed to. That is the real world. And I wanted my kids to see some of the real side of the world, if I can say it that way, that I'd had growing up. And so ultimately chose to relocate down here and give my family a better better environment, if I can say it that way. And I will say Decatur
more
has more well-rounded environment, and it certainly has not disappointed. Decatur has been great. We love it here, and we've grown into the community. It took a little bit while longer because, like I said, we came right before COVID, and then you stopped meeting people, and everybody you saw was behind a mask, and so it took a couple of years, to kind of get more. Integrated into the community and things like that. The kids weren't in school initially, and so as they got older and they started to get into school, and my wife got more involved in various organizations and worked at the Y and some of these other things. It really built out our social network, and realistically, that's what makes a home is your friendships, your social network, etc. And I will say, I mean, Decatur, the people are just so much more friendly. It's a very different environment than Chicagoland. Chicagoland is somewhat of what I call an urban rat race. People don't really say hello. It's all about just get moving, get something done. Whereas here in Decatur, it's people are friendly. They genuinely care about their neighbors, things like that, that you don't have in faster paced environments, if I can say it that way.
Right. So it's interesting that a lot of times you'll hear the phrase kids these days. And, if I go back, 15 years, 20 years even, where you've got the boomers, the baby boomers talking about kids these days. And I caught on for a while and I was like, you raised those kids. Yeah. Those are your generation raised those kids. And so it's interesting though to look at your decision that you made to, take your family from a very sheltered and what would appear to be a privileged and easy lifestyle to something that is much more diverse, much more exposed, maybe not as easy and glitzy to this is the real world. And I think that goes back to there's another phase of kids these days, and I have teenagers at home now too, so I'm dealing with what kids am I raising? But that's interesting to hear how you really took that approach and saw Decatur as an opportunity to raise well-rounded people.
Yeah, absolutely. And even more than that, I wanted my kids exposed to a more rural background. I grew up in a very small town, rural background, farming communities. Was the first part of my life. And I felt that was important. People should know where their food comes from, what it means to be a farmer, things like that. And so I wanted to at least give them some exposure to that. And certainly Decatur, being in the middle of the heartland of America, where all the corn and soybeans are, this was an opportunity for them to get exposed to that more rural aspect or agricultural aspect as well. In addition to, Decatur is a big small community that basically has, a very stratified segment of the population. There's very high end white collar jobs all the way down to blue collar manufacturing jobs and everything in between. And so you get everything all in one place, as opposed to, in Chicagoland, the suburbs, each suburb is very, can be very homogenous where, all of the people are white collar, et cetera. And it becomes somewhat segregated within the socioeconomic class that particular suburb is kind of organically has. And so this Decatur is a very, stratified community in that way, and that's what I loved about it, and gave the kids the exposure to that. So
what I'm going to take this question for a different approach, and it's what do you value here? But what if tomorrow you were told you're moving? So let's say you were in the military still, and it's like, hey, you're moving back to Virginia. What are some of the main things that you go, I'm going to miss that about Decatur? Or if you got away, you're going to go, I would just wish I could go on the bike trail. What's some of the main things for you and your family?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the things that I think is underappreciated and non-recognized in Decatur is that there's a lot of stuff to do here. On almost any given weekend, there's 8, 10, 12, 15 different things. And oftentimes you can't go to all of them because they're overlapping.
Right.
And I don't think that a lot of people recognize that, but, particularly being a person with young kids, my kids are very high energy. They have to be doing something positive. Otherwise, Otherwise, they start to get into trouble and mischief. And so we try to keep them very active. But just the number of parks that are available, the conservation district and all the facilities that they have, the amenities that we have, along the lake and Nelson Park and those types of things, the Children's Museum, the zoo, we're memberships to all those things because those are things that the kids, they're positive activities that the kids can do that give them an education towards something. And so there's just a long list of things like that. The DISC is always having activities for kids, and the YMCA and different organizations like that. There's always something going on that in the farmers markets during the summer, are wonderful. We're regular almost every single week. We go to that. Again, because it's a good activity for the kids. It gives them exposure to the community as well as just a place of belonging. And generally they're getting some type of entertainment or something out of it as well. So it's wonderful. So all of those things are the things that I would miss the most now that I've learned about all those things that we have here in Decatur. And that is something that we, even from the city side, are trying to do a better job of really pulling those things together. And so I know the Visitors and Convention Bureau, for example, on Thursdays now, I believe, so later tonight, they will put together a list of all of the activities that are happening in Decatur over Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And we make sure that we push that out because, again, I don't think a lot of people realize it because there are so many different organizations, so many different entities that are doing different events. Last weekend, for example, there was the Craft Beer Festival down in Central Park. There's just always something exciting going on like that, and the lineup at the Devon and things like that. And so trying to better push that information out, because I think that a lot of people that know about it appreciate it. And what we have to do a better job of is making sure that is out there so everybody knows about it, if I can say it that way.
And it happens, and I've felt the same way too, where I'll see somebody post something about they were at an event or this was an awesome experience. And, there's always people who go, I wish I would have known about that. And I feel that way sometimes too. So it's good to know that the city and the Convention Visitors Bureau is trying to gather that information and put it out into a central point too, because there are so many things going on, and every entity has their method of advertising and marketing too. So
right. So this weekend is the Duck Derby, for example, out at the Children's Museum. And I know I've been getting the emails. But for all those parents or all those people that are not on that email list, how do we make sure that they're aware of it, and so they're not reading about it, in the paper on Monday, saying, "Man, I wish I was there," or whatever. There's going to be a lot of nice activities there, and again, it's an opportunity. The city's involved in that. We're going to put vehicles and stuff out there so that we can try to inspire the young kids to climb on our public works equipment and say, hey, I want to drive a Vector truck one day or whatever and street sweep, or I want to, all of those types of things. That's why we do it, is to grow the next generation of public servants that will ultimately serve the community in which they live in.
Absolutely. Switching a little more business oriented then, and to your role at the city, you've been the deputy city manager here for 4.5-5 years. I guess, what are not projects or things that have progressed, but have you seen a change in approach or attitude or mentality of both the city staff, workers, and in the community?
Sure. I mean, I think at the end of the day, when I first got here in 19, the city was still coming out of the 2008, 2009, 2010 housing crisis, if I can say it that way. That was about a 10-year recovery.
Absolutely.
So 2018, 2019 is when we were just kind of coming out. Things were looking up a little bit, but there wasn't a lot of bright prospects on the horizon, if I can say it that way.
That's fair.
And then COVID happened. Certainly the good news is COVID didn't just happen to Decatur. It was a global pandemic, and so we weren't in it alone. And so that certainly is a positive. But I think that's really when a lot of things started to shift in the positive direction. And I'm sure it was just a coincidence. That's just the way it was. Certainly some of these things would have already been in the works prior to 2020, because the one thing I will say is economic development is slow. A lot of neighborhood revitalization is slow. Things take time.
Slow meaning they take time.
They take time. Yes.
Doesn't mean you're going slow.
Right.
It's just there's a lot of pieces to line up.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't recognize, that, if you want a new, you name the business, whether it's a Chick-fil-A or any other type of retail, from the time that they have an interest till the time that store actually opens, it's a minimum 2 to 3 years. And you know this from being in the real estate market, from the time they start shopping for a piece of property and they express interest in the community until the day they actually have the ribbon cutting, there's a long lag time in between. And then if you put that on top of commercial or industrial projects, that's double.
Right.
A complex industrial project like some of the ones that we have here in Decatur, they take 5, 6, 7 years to develop. And so having patience and seeing that. And so the point was in 2020 and beyond, I think that, realistically, a lot of positive things started aligning in Decatur. And certainly the mayor and the city council has a list of priorities and economic development and retail, employee recruitment, things like that are all things that are important to the community. And so those are the things that myself and the city staff work towards. And so we started to get better at a lot of those things, trying to change the perception of the city of Decatur, both within the community as well as externally to the broader world, showing that we can do better. Instead of having the traditional model of you come in and you talk to the various city departments and you get bounced around, we're going to set up a business development concierge. So if you have an idea, you have a business and you want to come and locate here in Decatur, we're going to give you one person to deal with, and they're going to help you through the entire process, the entire entitlement process, from land use all the way through building permits and engineering site plans, and ultimately arrange for you to be handed over to the Chamber of Commerce so that you get a smooth transition there and they can show up for your ribbon cutting. Yep. And you're part of the nice. Broader business community. And so all of that, we kind of put that infrastructure in place during COVID. And then that's been paying dividends since then. And so, one after another, we've had a lot of positive developments, both on the smaller scale retail developments. I mean, for an example, last week we issued a certificate of occupancy for our first Cold Stone Creamery. And for some people, that's a huge deal. Right. The Cold Stone Creamery is something that a lot of communities have. And yep. It's nice to have it here in Decatur. And so, just little things like that, all the way up to the, $1 billion plus, power plant that's been announced. There's a lot of right. projects in between that basically have chosen to come to Decatur for the same reasons that you and I chose to come here. That, yep. It's got a high quality of life, lower cost of living than so many other places, good utility, good infrastructure, and we're blessed with a good, hardworking workforce.
Absolutely.
And so all of those things, I think, put together that, more and more people started to notice Decatur and say, hey, that's where we want to be. And I will say that, the current administration and the previous presidential administration, both of them helped our situation with the concept of Buy American. The trying to, and COVID really, I think, accelerated that. It highlighted the fact that we were relying too much on international goods.
Absolutely.
When there was a time we couldn't buy masks and we couldn't buy right. nose swabs, right? Right. And so the federal government had to step in and prop up companies to make nasal swabs and masks. I think really highlighted the fact that we are too reliant on foreign goods. We need to onshore more American yep. manufacturing. And what better place than Decatur, because we still have all of that industrial infrastructure from the 1980s and the 1990s, when a lot of that stuff started going offshore, overseas. Now more and more of that's being brought back to the United States, and we are well situated to really embrace those types of companies. Yep. We have the infrastructure, we have the workforce, we've got the companies that know how to build these types of facilities, all that type of thing.
I think you use the word accelerant, and that's absolutely the word I was going to use for, we look back now on COVID and it was an accelerant or a stimulant for many facets of where we're at now, and certainly manufacturing and reshoring or bringing it back is one element. But I think just communication, Zoom is just widely accepted now. Yep. I mean, it's just what we do for convenience. It used to be it was more of a special thing, and I think Decatur again being at the center of that. Through COVID, just even from a housing standpoint, from people relocating, people wanting to live in a smaller community like this, as opposed to where they've been, it was certainly accelerated over the last few years. That on top of now some manufacturing coming back and some other, advanced technologies, whether it be electrical generation or electrical powered, vehicles. We really are the hub of it right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, I think that, because people can work remotely. That's the one biggest takeaway from COVID was that people recognize that they really can work remotely. And a lot of people had been doing it at different levels, for a few years prior to it, but that accelerated it. And I think a lot of people around the rest of the country and even around the rest of the world even said, hey, I can do this job from anywhere. Why am I still living here, right?
Right.
And so they looked at the places that have a higher quality of life and that have more amenities, assets, lower cost of living, cheaper housing, things like that. And Decatur checks all of those boxes. I remember getting a call a few months ago from a couple. One of the gentlemen was Australian and the other gentleman is Italian. They both work for a cruise line ship as executive chefs. They travel all over the world on these cruise line ships. But they live here in Decatur. And their interest was, they're saying, hey, we want to fix up some more of these old historic houses in the Milliken Heights area because that's where we live. What can the city do to help? And so
we should have a conversation about that because I have some ideas there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just like, in my mind, when I first got that call, I'm like, man, of all the places in the world, that you chose to live, you chose the right place.
Absolutely.
And we are working with them and they are actually rehabbing another house, right now.
Nice.
And it's just, it's such a cool thing. And so we get those calls all the time from people coming from all over the place saying, hey, I never thought I could get a lakeside house for $250,000.
Right.
But here in Decatur, you can. And so that is something that I think is underappreciated. And it's going to suit the city very well moving forward for a long time.
When I did my MBA at Milliken, actually, there were two books we had to read. One was The Lexus and the Olive Tree, and the other one was The World is Flat. And I mean, these are books from, the 2000s, and especially The World is Flat. And is the idea that, through the internet and connectivity it doesn't matter if you're around the world, everybody is connected. And I would like to see a remake of those books now, just to see how flat are we now?
Yeah.
And as much as somebody could live here and work somewhere else, we have the opposite effect too. We can have these massive industrial projects that are happening that need some of the top engineers and top scientists working on them and running them that could be anywhere in the world also.
Yeah.
And they work in Decatur but live around the world. So again, it's interesting how things have changed and how Decatur's benefiting from that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the airport has jet service now, so getting here and getting, from anywhere in the country, getting in and out for those weekday trips that you have to come here to the ADM corporate offices or to come to some of the industrial projects is phenomenal. And quite frankly, it's, that's because now we're not only attracting people from, within the United States. I mean, a lot of the new businesses that have been coming are international companies, the Innova Feed, for example, is a French company. LG Chem is South Korean, and they somehow, of all the places around the world, they settled on Decatur, Illinois. And it's just, it's phenomenal that we have that type of credibility and recognition of what's happening here, and people do see it, and we want to continue to your point on the start of the podcast, to educate people and to elevate what's really happening here in Decatur, because there is a lot going on. We have a lot to be proud of as a community and a lot to look forward to.
So certainly your family being here is important to you. Now you wear two hats. You're a family man and a resident of Decatur, but you're also the deputy city manager too. So how do you weigh those issues sometimes? The decisions you make are affecting you and your neighbors.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, at the end of the day, it is a unique position to be in, or a unique dilemma, if I can say it that way, that, our job as city management and as city employees is to provide recommendations to the mayor and city council to make tough decisions sometimes, and I'll say, an example of it is the garbage for an example. The city recently made some changes to the garbage and ultimately raised the cost of garbage service in the city. And that's something that impacts all of us, but I think a lot of times the public or members of the public forget about is that the mayor and city council and generally the majority of city staff, we all live in the city of Decatur too. And so the decisions that are made, they are carefully thought through. Very, we tried to put as much analysis into it as possible and to provide a recommendation because at the end of the day, those decisions impact all 30,000 households in the city of Decatur, including most of my employees and all of my elected officials. And so those decisions are not made lightly. There is a lot of analysis that goes into those decisions because we ultimately have to pay. When we raise the taxes, we pay that increase in taxes. When we raise the garbage prices, we have to pay that. But on the garbage, for an example, what the city ultimately recently decided was that we're going to provide yard waste service to everybody all year round. And that's just the right thing to do. And not everyone.
So it's not always analysis only. There's also kind of what seems right here.
Right.
Yeah. Because we don't live in the country where people can just push their leaves out all the time.
Yeah. In some places in the city, some people may not need that service, but at the end of the day, we also recognize that the majority of the places that they do need that service, and if we don't provide it, there will be some people that don't get that service and they don't do the appropriate thing with their leaves and branches, and it sits in the curb and it plugs the storm drains. Now we have flooding in that area, things like that. And so the city took the approach, look, let's spread it across the entire community. Everybody's going to pay for it. The majority of people are going to use it, and it's better for the community as a whole. And so it's making those decisions for the collective and not for an individual. And so certainly, like you said, there is two hats. I take off my my resident hat when I get to work usually, and I put on my hat for the community, if I can say it that way. Or there's a difference of opinion, I'll say, well, personally, I believe this, but, in my role in the city, this is the right thing to do. And so, but for the most part, those decisions are not, they're not that different between the two of them all the time.
Right. And I think that is a unique approach as opposed to in some other roles in some cities, even like you don't have to be a resident of a community that you are acting in government in. And you get in the whole representation issue of course you'll raise taxes. You don't even live here.
Yeah.
So I think as a community, we need to respect and appreciate that, you and your role and most of the city staff as being residents of our community.
Yeah, too. Absolutely. The decisions that they make every day impact them as well. And they treat our residents with respect because at the end of the day, they all want to be treated with respect as well.
Absolutely. Speaking of looking forward, 10 years. What do you see? What's happening? What's important? What's growing? There's no wrong answer to this. We're here. What do you see? In 10
I'd
years,
love to say that. I'd love to say in 10 years we'd be back to being the fourth largest city in the state that we were once before. That's probably not going to happen. But what I can tell you is that I firmly believe that we are on the rebound. I firmly believe that the city of Decatur's population loss has largely stopped, and we're now going the other direction. And we're starting to see this. With the renewed interest in the real estate, things like that. Real estate values are increasing because people are moving here to Decatur.
New construction is happening again that hasn't happened since 2008 and 9.
Yep. Yeah. So all of those things I think will continue to drive both population growth, renewed interest. And of course, with the population growth and with the new population coming in, that means they're going to want new things, new amenities, pickleball courts, things like that, which means that we'll continue to adapt and change as a community as well. And so it's exciting. It's exciting to look to the future. Because a lot of the economic activity will drive the population activity, and that will ultimately help to rebuild the community back to Decatur was a very prominent city in the past. When I mean prominent, I mean one of the top cities in the entire state, and I firmly believe that we belong there again. And it'll take us a couple of years to get there. The Decatur didn't get to the way that it was or the way that it is today overnight. Right. It's a slow growth, but that is accelerating, as you said earlier. That I think that, fast forward 5 years and 10 years from now, Decatur will look very different than it does today. We still have some struggles and some challenges that we need to work through as a community, but I think that there's the right people are in the right places right now. There's a lot of synergy between all of the various entities that are involved, because the city can't fix these problems alone, right? It's all about the community. We can help prime the pumps of certain things. We can collaborate with other organizations, our nonprofit, our social service agencies, our other taxing bodies, the school district, the park district. We can work together with them to really address these issues and continue to move us forward. But even now, when I look around and I see all the new, the park district is putting up phenomenal parks all over the city, and that's inspiring, for a young kid. My kids, they get bored from the same park. And so that is one of the things that my wife has done very well is that my kids always want to go to a new park. And there's so many parks and little pocket parks all over the community that, the first couple of years, the first couple of years, she would just go to all the different ones. And now they get to go back to the same ones, and now they got new stuff there or whatever.
Do you remember what was over there?
And some of the ones that are under construction, they're just like, we want to go play. And I'm like, you got to wait till the snow fence comes down. It's still under construction. But that's the type of thing that shows progress, that shows that we're continuing to invest in our infrastructure, invest in the people. And that's going to pay significant dividends. And I firmly believe that a lot of the kids that are graduating from high school and graduating from Milliken or Richland, in the past, they always looked outside of Decatur and said, if I want to get a good job, I got to go to Chicago. I got to go to St. Louis, somewhere else. And I think that will change. I think that they'll say, I don't have to go anywhere. I was born here, raised here. My family still lives here. I went to school here, and I can get a job anywhere here that can compete with some of the best jobs in any other market around the country. And so I think that once we get that to change, it has a significant impact on what our community looks like and what it will look like in the future.
Absolutely. And I think with population growth, even incremental population growth makes every one of those events just a little bit busier this weekend. And every organization that's running those events gets a little bit more benefit, and every restaurant that's out there gets a few more meals served. And as that continues to grow and grow, the parks need to be there more, the services need to be there more, the entertainment options are there more, and continue to grow. And then that further makes it even more attractive to new companies and new people to come to town.
Yeah, very much a snowball effect. As that builds and builds and builds. And it's like a snowball. It's small, small initially, and you have to roll it a long ways before it gets to be bigger. And then as it gets bigger and bigger, you roll it less and less, and it just compounds.
Right.
And I feel that that's exactly the current path or trajectory that the city of Decatur's on. We're in the beginning phases of the crafting of that ball, and it will pick up steam and speed as we go, and it's going to continue to get better and better. And so I tell people all the time, there's never been a better time to invest in Decatur, because you're not going to get it. You're never going to get it for cheaper than what you are today.
Absolutely.
And so that is, I think different than it was a few years ago.
Correct. And to that snowball analogy, I think if you look back to 19 when you came, and if you look at that snowball analogy, you said then economic development was slow. I think there were a lot of pieces there. There were plans, there were things there. So the snowball really started then. Then it started building, and I think now it really is about to take off.
Absolutely. Yeah, the momentum has been there a little while, and it's building and building, which makes, quite honestly, makes my job more and more exciting every day. I got a cold call just, a couple days ago. Somebody saying, hey, I've already owned a hotel here in Decatur. I want to build another one. Find me some sites. And it's like, those are the type of exciting projects that, were probably unthinkable a few years ago. But now that's the reality of how it goes is that we are on a lot of people's radar. A lot of big brands that say, hey, you know what? They're always looking for a good, safe, solid choice to invest in. And Decatur is now on that list again to say, hey, we want to put some money there because it's going to pay off in the long run or whatever. And
Great. Good. Well, Jon, I want to thank you for your time. This is really great. I'm glad to have you in Decatur. Glad that it's been good to you and your family, and look forward to this continuing to be your home. Appreciate all you've done with the city, being the deputy city manager. We can probably go into that in another conversation about what do you really do.
Yeah.
But I know it's a lot of behind the scenes work and a lot of work, a lot of getting things done and changing mindsets at times, and probably challenging mindsets at times too. So super excited to have you in that role, and appreciate all you've done.
Thank you very much. Some days I feel like I have the best job in the world, and other days can be certainly a little more frustrating. But it's been my honor and privilege to serve the city of Decatur and all the residents and businesses that are here. So
very good. All right, thank you, Jon.
Thank you.
That was a great conversation with Jon Kindseth from the city of Decatur. I really appreciate how he feels his position is to have skin in the game. He lives here. He brought his family here. He's raising his kids here. Him and his wife are involved in the community. And also that, decisions he makes at the city or helps to make or guide at the city do impact him as an individual. So really appreciate Jon being on, and hope you enjoyed watching too. Tune in next week.